walk us through what I think is kind of the most visually interesting version of the tour on a condensed basis, and we'll tell some stories around some of these things and take questions, of course. So to give you a little bit of background, what is this? Why are you here? It starts with a story, a short story, which is that I love technology, and I love trying to figure out what is next and how can we bring some of high-tech ideas or just projects and adapt them to either community initiatives or just bring them to Utica. And when my wife and I had gotten married, we went on a honeymoon to the West Coast, and we did a driving tour down the West Coast for our honeymoon. And when we stopped in San Francisco, I had been following this startup company that was called Detour. And they put out a product that I thought was incredibly interesting. It was an app that you could download, and it was a GPS guided walking tour, and it was super pinpoint accurate. So they had these beautiful soundscapes and walking tours around San Francisco. They also had them in New York, but you would download the app, pay $5, and then it would basically say, like, go to the corner of this street and this street, and then just wait. And then the app would understand where you were. It would fire up, and you put your headphones in, and it would take you on a tour of the different streets and the different sights and sounds. And it was eerie in such a way because as you walked, you know, as I can remember, part of the tour was, you know, now look to your right, and you may, down this alley, you may see a man playing this ancient Chinese instrument. And it's like, as soon as we did that, it knew exactly where we were, and we turned and there's the guy. It was just crazy, and it was beautiful, and it was emotive. And so we took one of these in San Francisco, and I said, man, I wish that we could build one of these things in Utica. So came back, and I just started literally stalking the founders and the developers of this project online and trying to email anyone that would listen to me and asking them if I could, like, how can I get involved in building a project for my own city? And they're like, where's Utica? Right? This is only in, this was in Austin, Texas, San Francisco, and New York City. And anyway, was badgering them. Eventually, they said, well, we're going to roll out some test markets, and we'll give you a developer license, and here's a toolkit, you can figure out how to do this. So I brought this idea to Geoff and a third partner that was involved with this, Matt Wagner, who is an incredible sound engineer. And we went about trying to figure out how could we do a very interesting walking tour of a district of Utica. So, what we started doing is just talking to historians locally and just having a lot of conversations around, you know, what happened around this area. I'm actually in Bag Square right now. That's where Think is located. And trying to weave a narrative. And what we found was that there was some great stories around really the birth of the city, which happened here in Bag Square East. That's really where Utica began. And so with all of these stories, we then hooked up with Joe Bottini, who's another local historian. And we literally put mics up and cameras up, and we walked through Bag Square East. And he told us all these stories about the different landmarks that we were going through. So we took all that audio, and then we built our own version of this tour. This was in, when did we do this, Geoff? This was like we did it in like 8 weeks. It was a quick turnaround, I think.
It was about 8 weeks, and this was
8 weeks?
Fall of 2017. Yeah.
You know, I was like, was it 2017 or 2018? This has been around for a while, but 2017. So this is an old project. So we haul to like build this thing, and we did a test run with the app. We actually had probably about, I think, like 30 people showed up at the train station here, and it was some beta testers, and we did the walk together. And I think everyone that did it had a great experience. And then I was going to say, and then the unthinkable happened, but we've all been going through the unthinkable for the past year. So before the unthinkable happened, the previously unthinkable thing happened, which was that I got a letter in like January from Detour that says, hi, everybody, we're shutting down the company. It's like no further communication. And all this work that we had put in to build this damn thing, it was just going to cease to exist in about 30 days. And we were incredibly disappointed. And, come to find out, I believe the company was actually bought by Bose, like the speaker company, and they were just shutting it down. So this was a giant bummer. So anyway, the project went away. And as we all know, 2020, the dumpster fire that was the 2020 year, we're all in our houses and we're in our basements. And I had all of this data, and we thought, okay, how can we take this thing that really relied on you having the technology, downloading the app, being in a location and experiencing, how can we retool this thing where people might be able to consume it in a different way? And especially since we're all locked in our homes, how might we do that? And so what we did is we took the audio, which was really the crux of that experience, and we made it into a 3-part podcast. Then we took the script from that audio and I made it into basically a version of the same tour that you can read, and we integrated Google Street View. So in the landmarks, if you go to the website, which is uticadetour.com, and it's been up there and it will be there, you can choose Street View Tour, and you can read through the tour, and the landmarks that we're speaking about, we actually embedded 360-degree Google Street View. So you can actually look around and look at the actual landmarks that we're writing about. Obviously, if you download the podcast, we would encourage you to come here to Bag Square and listen through the 3-part podcast. It's about 20, 30 minutes. You'll start on the former site of Old Fort Schuyler, which is east of Union Station. And we give you some directions where you'll actually be able to traverse and kind of get through the tour. And you'll end in what used to be Bag Square. But then the third version, which Geoff is going to kind of show you, is we got a little nuts. And if anyone's used Google Earth before, it's an amazing, amazing technology. And I spent probably way too much time over 2020 lying in bed, just surfing on Google Earth, visiting places that I could only go to in my mind now. And we built a version of this tour in Google Earth. And that's one of the things we're going to show you tonight. So we actually use 3D renderings of buildings and satellites where you can fly through, basically, a historical version of Utica. We were able to draw in old landmarks. We've uploaded historical photos of those landmarks so you can kind of see what they've evolved from. And we've included even some videos of some stories that we collected along the way. So in addition to Joe Bottini, we spoke with lots of other historians. I was particularly impressed with the stories that we got at Union Station Barbershop, which I believe is it's only one of 2 or 3. It's like the oldest continuous operating barbershops and train stations in America. And Leo was very generous to us, and he told us all sorts of stories. Some of those are available on the tour, and some of them we could talk to you guys about. But anyway, that's kind of the genesis of the story. We have this gem of the history of Bag Square, really from the 1700s through present day, and we're trying to tell the same story in 3 different ways. And so again, it's at uticadetour.com. You can experience it at your leisure, and we hope you will, and we hope you'll tell friends. We were super disappointed because we launched this thing and we got some great press out of it, and some other bureaus of tourism emailed us and said, "Hey, can you build one for us?" And then the whole thing kind of went to pot. So that's the history of the tech. I'm gonna be quiet now, and I'll probably unfortunately interrupt Geoff here and there because I do that a lot. But I want to turn it over to Geoff, who's going to kind of take us through some of this stuff, and we're going to share a screen so you guys can have a little bit of that experience. But again, you can do this all on your own at your leisure at uticadetour.com.
Thank you, Ryan. Now you're going to run the Google Earth.
Oh yeah, totally. I can do that. And by the way, I'm supposed to introduce Geoff. Geoff, I don't know what your bio is, but I know that Geoff is a super creative individual. He's a partner at MPW Marketing. When you hear his voice tonight, you will never unhear it because he's the voice of many local commercials and spots. And George, might you not share a screen with us? I don't know who George is, but maybe he can not share a screen. Because I can't start if you're sharing. Or Patrick, can you take over? George, can you hear? George Abel, can you hear us? You're sharing your screen.
George, we're all.
It's a wonderful screen, but it's not the screen we're looking for right now.
He's trying to sign in, so whoever is the facilitator has got to get him signed in.
Or Patrick, you're the host. You should be able to override that.
Is this George on screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
George, we're going to get your password.
He should be not screening. No.
Patrick, you should be able to take over. If you should be able to disable that on your end as the host.
I'm trying here. I'm new to Zoom. I apologize. Let me see. Brian, I'm going to make Ryan, you're the host.
All right. I'm taking over.
There you go. You can take it. We'll get it.
Here we go. All right. Thank you. All right. I'm gonna boot up my screen, and I'm going to do that. All right, Geoff.
All right. And so while Ryan gets that going, I'll finish the introduction.
Great.
So for those of you, if you could see me, hello, and welcome, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, my name is Geoff Storm. As Ryan mentioned, I am a partner, and I'm the creative director at MPW Marketing, based in Clinton. And that's about it for my bio. I mean, other than, I mean, what's relevant to this project is that, you know, Ryan and I go back a lot of years. And as he mentioned earlier, we've done many projects together, including TEDx Utica, Utica Firefly. And, you know, we're just always looking for fun things to do and cool ways to bring new information to people. And so that was, you know, as you mentioned, that was sort of the genesis of this whole idea. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of walk you through an abbreviated version of the tour, which you could actually hear, as Ryan mentioned, you know, if you went down Two Bag Square and walked this tour while listening to the podcast, it'll guide you every step of the way. And we'll sort of take you through a virtual version of that now. And again, if you can't see me, I apologize. It's going to look like I'm looking away from the screen. I'm referring to my notes on another screen. I do not have this committed to memory. Maybe 4 years ago I did, but I don't anymore. So the tour actually starts at where we are right now, and you'll see stop one start here. This is a parking lot just off 2nd Street. And as Ryan mentioned it, we're east of Union Station, down where the railroad tracks are. And you can see those railroad tracks running right around toward the top of the screen there. Now, we're kind of flashing back in time to the 18th century, to the 1750s, let's say. Now, at the time, the Mohawk River, if you can see where the trains are, see where that blue line is there, that's about where the Mohawk River was at that time. The Mohawk River has been rerouted, and so where it is now is not its original location. So that's about where the river was then. Now, at this point, there were two creeks that flowed into the Mohawk River. There was one called Bellew Creek, which came out of the hills to the south of us, or toward the bottom of your screen, and Reels Creek that came from the north, and they both joined the river at about this point. And there were also Native American trails that ran both east-west along the river and north-south along those creeks. And so all these different transportation routes connected right here at this point. Why? Because of those two creeks, as they dumped into the Mohawk River, you know, they deposited silts into the riverbed, And so you had a very shallow point of the river known as a ford. So that in those days, the only way you could travel was by water or by foot. So the river is very important for transportation east-west, and that ford is very important for transportation or for, walking transportation north-south, because this is one of the places you can cross the river without needing a bridge. And there weren't bridges in those days, at least in this area crossing the Mohawk River. So at this point, when the British were still in control of the American colonies, they were at war with France over control of North America, mostly over the fur trade and some other things. And they decided to build a fort here at this location because of the ford, partially to protect the ford, but also because this is an important transportation route. And so they built a fort, which was essentially a supply depot. And they named it Fort Schuyler, and it's named for the commander who was in charge of the fort's construction, a man named Peter Schuyler. And so that's where the fort got its name. And you can see there on the screen the general shape of the fort. It was built like a triangle with sort of a star-shaped bastion at the south end of the fort. Now, if you can, trying to picture where this is now, if you're familiar with this area, right down to the bottom of your screen, there's a large building. You see that it's the old Charles Millar and Company building. And you can see that as you drive around Bagg Square. That's, yeah, so Ryan's sort of indicating that now. So that's kind of where we are. And this is a parking lot where you see that little star shape on the fort. And so this is kind of an interesting spot. I'm a big fan of colonial American history. And I'd always wondered, exactly where was Fort Schuyler? So this is about as close as it could be pinpointed at this point. This is where we believe Fort Schuyler was, what it looked like, and about its size. It was a pretty good sized fort. Again, it wasn't built really it was built for military reasons, but it wasn't built to, it was built more as a supply depot, as a structure to protect supplies and soldiers moving up and down the river. So it wasn't really a combat fort. So that's where the tour starts. And then next we would walk to the south and we would stop up on 2nd Street at the corner of 2nd and Main Street. So here's where, and there now you can see the Charles Millar and Son and Company building right there on the left of the screen. This is Main Street, and you'll see the little marker that says the road to Albany. This is Main Street. Now, we're going to flash forward to the 19th century at this point, so the 1800s. And so if you're standing there with 2nd Street and the Millar building on your left, Main Street in front of you, you got to imagine this was a dirt road, and it went from Utica all the way to Albany. This was in the 19th century. It was one of the main routes from Utica to Albany, or from this end of the valley to Albany. Next, we would turn to our right or to the west and head down Main Street. And this is where we're again moving through the 19th century into the early 20th century, and we start to learn a little bit about Utica's industries at that time. Utica was a big, I won't say meat packing, but it was big in the meat industry. So as you head down Main Street, you can see this one building that's still existing. And just to give you like a frame of reference again, so you're on Main Street. Over here on the left is the old former Trackside Tavern or Trackside Restaurant. And that empty parking lot that you see right there toward the middle of your screen, that had a building in it. All these lots were filled with buildings, and they were all meat buildings, meat company buildings. There was a company called the Farm Fresh Poultry Company, Armour and Company, Swift Wholesale Meat, Wilson's Wholesale Meat. And why? Well, by the 19th century, you had the Erie Canal and you had the railroad. And so, this was just a natural place with, with the train station right there, that industry began to flourish. And meats was one of those things here in Utica. So as we head down, continuing now the way we're facing to our left or to the west, Ryan's going to swing things around here. We're going to head down to the corner of 1st and Main. And you can see as he zooms out, the building sort of, yeah, and it's marked on the map. So there you can see where Wholesale Meats was on your left. It's now a vacant lot. and the building sort of toward the center that says Herd, and then there's a little building to its left as we face it called the Smith Sprayers Company. And actually the sign is still on the side of that building. I don't know if you can zoom in, Ryan, and see it. That was where the DB Smith Company was located. They built farm spraying equipment that was used by farmers all over the country. And then again, to the right of it now, you can see along the roof line, the Herd building. And that was a shoe company. And in the late 1800s, it was one of 4 shoe companies in Utica, which made Utica one of the major shoe manufacturing sites in the country at that time. Now, if we continue looking to the right, you see that building just to the right of the Herd building. Well, he spun around again. Let me get my bearings.
Am I right, or am I moving too quick? Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. So to the right of the Herd building, or now it would actually be to the left now because we've kind of flipped the map around. But it's this building right in the center of your screen. That building is actually, if you look at it, you can tell that it's actually 2 different buildings. And this is another good reason to actually go down and walk this. You can look at these buildings and you can see what I'm talking about. It's actually 2 buildings joined together. The front part of that building was a clothier company called H.P. Cross. And in the back section was the Brandegee and Wood clothier. They both manufactured clothes, and this was at a time when ready-made clothes were just becoming really popular. Before then, clothes were most often custom made. So that was what it was in that building originally. Then about 1950, excuse me, the building was taken over by Doyle Hardware. And that's how a lot of us still know this building today, the Doyle Hardware building. Now, continuing down Main Street, again, now we're sort of facing Union Station. And so the Doyle Hardware building was on our right. And okay, so you can see Union Station there. And now to the left of Union Station is Railroad Street. And again, the yellow line right down the middle there, that's Main Street. And now we'll talk a little bit about Union Station. It's really hard to describe. Probably anyone who's from this area, you're familiar with Union Station. You know what it looks like. It's an absolutely beautiful building, truly magnificent. It's built in the Italianate style. It's a very, very ornate building. And so how did Utica, little Utica, end up with such a magnificent train station? Well, first of all, Utica wasn't little Utica back then. It was a fairly significant city. But also in 1914, when Union Station was built, New York Central had plans of making this station their headquarters. And the New York Central Railroad ran from New York City up the Hudson and west over the Mohawk Valley. And they decided that they only wanted 3 stops. It was going to be New York City to Utica to Buffalo. And Utica was going to be the center, and that was where their headquarters was going to be because that was sort of the center of the line. But in 1915, New York Central changed their mind. This is a year later, after spending $1 million, which was an extremely exorbitant amount of money in 1914. After spending $1 million on this train station that they thought was going to be their headquarters, they changed their mind. And they moved their headquarters to New York City, or decided to establish their headquarters in New York City. So then New York Central partnered up with a number of other smaller train companies. And in 1916, they renamed this Union Station, the idea being that it was now a union of different train companies. Union Station is actually the 3rd railroad station to be built in Utica. And the way the building was laid out ended up having a pretty big impact on this neighborhood years later. So originally the architects proposed that the main entrance to the station would be fronted on Baggs Square. Now, it's important to know that what we think of as Baggs Square is only a part of what Baggs Square once was. That's how we end up with Baggs Square East and Baggs Square West today, right? Right now, there's a road. There's, boy, I'm drawing a blank. What is that road that runs through there? It's not Route 12.
It's an off-ramp, North Genesee Street.
Off-ramp to Genesee Street, yeah, thank you. and so there's a huge bridge that runs through. Well, that was part of, urban development in the 20th century. So Baggs Square sort of got cannibalized and split into 2 different sections. But at the time that the train station was built, that was literally a square, like an Italian piazza. And so the original idea was to have Union Station, the front of Union Station, face that square. So face toward the west rather than toward the south like it does now. But then for whatever reason, they changed their minds about that too and had the main entrance facing south towards Main Street. And so now what you have, once that road, once Genesee Street and the off-ramp ran through the middle of Baggs Square, now you've got Main Street with a dead end at both ends. Which, you know, who knows? It's pure speculation, but had the train station been laid out differently, maybe things would have been different. Who knows? Now, inside Union Station, and this is the part that I think we can bring up some photographs here, right, Ryan? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you guys see those? They're in the side here.
Yeah, I could see it.
Okay.
So this is for me, it was one of the most fascinating things about creating this. You know, having been in Union Station so many times, and every time I walk in the building, I just marvel at what an incredible building it is inside. But learning more about the story behind that building. So you can see here, there's a barrel vaulted ceiling in the center that's 47 feet high, and it has these octagonal coffers in the center. And each center section has a flat ceiling that's supposedly patterned or styled after a Roman bath. And there's skylights on each side, 4 on each side. And according to Joe Bottini, these skylights during World War II were painted black as a precaution against enemy planes at night. You can see those skylights running along just at the top of the photograph there. Now, the waiting room is 15,000 square feet. The building itself is 120 by 128 feet. The walls are all marble panels. The floor is terrazzo. In the middle of the building, so it'd be off to the right of this photograph. You could sort of see it behind the pillars, behind the columns. There are 4 37-foot-long benches on either side that are heated with steam inside the benches. Because a building this big, then as today, you wouldn't want to try to heat a building like that. So they heated the benches instead so that those people who were waiting for trains could wait in some form of comfort. And it's amazing to walk through this station and think about literally thousands and thousands of people who have passed through this building over the years, sat on those benches and waited for trains over the years. And lots of them were soldiers going off to war, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. And toward the front of the building, now if you were walking in from Main Street, on the left now, there's the Department of Motor Vehicles. But years and years ago, there was a USO facility right there on that spot where the Department of Motor Vehicles is now. So those soldiers who were waiting for their train, could go over to the USO station and, have a sandwich, a cup of coffee or whatever, and just sort of relax while they were waiting for their train. Now, these pillars, there's kind of an interesting story and a little bit of a controversy about the pillars themselves. There are 34 pillars, and what they are steel beams with concrete wrapped in Vermont marble, excuse me. Now, 26 of the pillars have horizontal seams around them. And each seam would indicate a different section wrapped around the pillar, and that's how they built it. But there were some pillars that didn't have those seams. And so, a lot of people over the years have wondered, why is that? Why are those different? And so some people contend that when this station was built in 1915, remember, New York Central originally planned this to be their headquarters. And so around the same time, they built Grand Central in New York City, which is what ended up becoming the headquarters. So the idea was that they were going to send here 8 marble pillars for this station because this was going to be their headquarters. And, a lot of people believe that those 8 pillars are the ones without the seams. So again, there are 8 pillars without seams. The rest of them have seams. And the debate is over why. What's the difference? Some people believe that those were originally intended for Grand Central, or that they were sent here by New York Central before the decision was made not to use this as their headquarters. And those would be solid maple column. I keep seeing marble columns. Now, a little hard to imagine because we can't see inside the station at this point, but you can see, it's not even pointed out on the map here. But so if you're facing from the entrance to Union Station on Main Street, so you're facing north inside Union Station, off to your right, inside Union Station, there is a barber shop. Ryan mentioned that earlier. And this is one of the few remaining operating barber shops in any train station in the country. It has been operating continuously since 1914. And, you know, just to step into this barbershop is really like stepping back in time into an old-fashioned barbershop. A lot of the shop is original. The floors, the sinks, the wainscoting on the walls, it's all White Cloud Vermont marble. It's all original. And according to the current proprietor, Leo Gilman, the barbershop chairs are originals too, from 1914, which is pretty cool. A lot of famous people have had their haircut there, including one name that I recall Leo talking about was Bobby Kennedy back in the 60s. He had his haircut there.
Geoff, can I interrupt you for a second on
absolutely.
barbershop stuff? You know, I don't know if this is actually in the audio tour, but there was a story. I'm going to have to find it. And if I can find it, I'll post it. But that Leo was telling us that the chairs are original, but wasn't there a pair of them that were lost for like 50 years or something? And like, he got them back. Like someone found them and they determined they were the original, right?
He got them back because somebody had contacted him randomly that they were storing them in a barn or something.
Yeah.
And asked him if he wanted them. And then he did the research that was, I think, if I remember right, and I could be wrong about this, but I think Leo then did the research and determined that, in fact, these were the original Union Station barber chairs. Yeah. But they're back in place now anyway.
Yep.
Another cool thing about being inside the station, and again, I hope you'll actually listen to the podcast and walk the tour yourself, because again, as you're standing just inside the entrance, so with Main Street behind you and you're facing north toward, you know, where you would actually board a train, right to your right are the old ticket booths. And if you stand in front of them and look down at the floor, you can see where the floor is indented. It's probably the better part of an inch into the floor. It's just worn away right in front of those windows. And that's literally from years and years and years of thousands and thousands of people standing in line to buy train tickets. And so now, going back outside Union Station, right across the street from Union Station, there is what is now an empty parking lot, but at one time, that was home to Utica's horse-drawn trolley station. And you can see a picture of it there on the right side of your screen. So moving along, yeah, so you can see that trolley would be right down at the bottom right of the map on your screen now. And sort of at the right center of your screen, on the other side of Railroad Street, that is what is now the Children's Museum. At one time, it was the H.C. Heber Company, or Heber Company. I'm not sure which way to pronounce it, to be honest with you. It was a wholesale dry goods company. Again, there's a lot of that stuff cropping up in this area because of the canal and because of the railroad. A lot of goods were shipped here, and so there were a lot of storage houses and warehouses and stores and things like that. And then across the street from the Children's Museum is what is the Kids Oneida building, but was originally built for the Utica Daily Press. So way back when, well, I don't know, I hate to say way back when, I can still remember a time when Utica had two daily newspapers. There was the Observer Dispatch in the evening, and the Daily Press was the morning paper. And so that was the original building, still standing today. Now, if we were to continue down Main Street between the Children's Museum and the Kids Oneida building, there's a park on our right just before we hit those bridges. And that's called the Bagg Commemorative Park, because it commemorates Bagg's Hotel, which was a very significant hotel, an important part of Utica's history, used to stand on that spot. It was originally a wooden tavern built in 1794. Over the years, it was expanded. The building was expanded until it essentially filled that lot where the park is now. The park is marked by a stone wall, and that is approximately the same size as the hotel when it was in its heyday. And there's a stone building now in the center of that park, we guess right around the spot where the original wooden tavern stood. And that building is a memorial to Thomas R. Proctor. Now, he was the last person who owned Bagg's Hotel after a long line of proprietors. This is in the 1930s. And he was a big benefactor of Utica's Proctor Park, all the things that have been named after the Proctor family. So his wife, Mariah Proctor, inherited the hotel when Thomas died. And by 1932, it was pretty obvious that, the hotel had seen its best days. You had many other hotels in Utica, the Hotel Hamilton, the Hotel Utica, the St. James Hotel was pretty much right across the way. And so in 1932, while the Great Depression was on, she decided to tear the hotel down. But because of the Great Depression and so many people were out of work, Mariah Proctor ordered that hand labor only be used to demolish the hotel, and that would put a lot of people out to work. And then all of the wood from the demolished hotel, she ordered to have just piled on Main Street, and that anybody who wanted to come and grab some was welcome to it. Again, remember in those days, most people still heated with wood. And so the building in the center there, the Baggs Square Memorial, is actually a memorial to Thomas Proctor. You'll also see as you walk through there a blue New York State historical marker near the building that indicates, some of the people who've stayed there, Washington Irving. The sign claims that George Washington stayed at Baggs Hotel, but apparently that's untrue. He actually never did stay there. Now on the other side of the Baggs Park, and you can see it in this photograph, so it's up about where the railroad tracks are now. Okay, we're spinning around, so it's right where this parking lot is. That's actually the site of the original train station in Utica. That was the very first train station. And that was also the American Express headquarters. Back in that day, American Express's headquarters, its first headquarters, was right here in Utica, right there in what is now a parking lot. Another interesting thing about Baggs Tavern, and probably a lot of you have heard this story, this Baggs Tavern was where Utica was named. At the time, the village was called Old Fort Schuyler in honor of the fort. But some local residents felt like they wanted a better name, a different name, and there were a number of names in contention. So it was one night at the tavern where they literally put all the names in a hat, drew the name out, and Utica was the name that was chosen. Utica is actually named for an ancient city in northern Africa. And then finally, we end our tour at the most recent bit of construction in Baggs Square, the Baggs Square mural. It's the Always Making History mural. And here on this mural, you'll find, 250 years of Utica history, starting with the importance of Old Fort Schuyler, the ford in the Mohawk River, and walking through over 110 people, places, and events that shaped Baggs Square and truly the entire city of Utica. The mural itself is about 80 feet long, and it was completed in April of 2016 in just 4.5 months, which is actually pretty incredible. That includes all the research, writing, lots of proofing, design, and installation. Michelle McCarrick-Truitt, who's a good friend of Ryan's and mine, was one of the driving forces behind the project, and she actually contributed a lot to this detour project as well. And that's where we'll conclude this very abbreviated walking tour. Virtual walking tour, I should say.
And so with that, I'm trying to think if there's, well, I guess we're happy to take any questions, unless Geoff, you've got anything else to add. I got to thank Geoff too for really doing the heavy lifting on this, and grateful that this has been a while since we've kind of gone through it, but he's also the voice, the narrator on the podcast version of the tour as well, him and Joe Bottini.
Well, I don't have anything to add right now. I mean, I wish, I really would just wish, I hope that people are interested enough and you'll actually go and try this. I mean, if you have a smartphone or something that you can actually listen to audio on, go down and walk your way through the tour, or at the very least, go on and do it online just the way we've been doing. We're very proud of it. We think it's interesting. We hope that folks will like it. I guess, with that, I would open it up to questions if anyone has any, or comments.
And sorry, I had to let people unmute. You can absolutely unmute yourself now if there's anything you want to talk about. We'll love stories too.
Thank you. So I didn't get to do the podcast yet. Is it actually geo-referenced? So as you move to the different segments come on as you walk around?
So no, that's one of the downsides with what we had was kind of satellite based. But if you just go to the podcast and go to the start, based on Geoff's narration, you'll be able to kind of walk through those sites. So it's not going to be automatic, but if you start with episode 1, you should be able to navigate yourself through it.
Yeah, that was the cool thing about the original Detour, Patrick, was you didn't really have to give it much thought. It would actually, as you walked, it would guide you and direct you. And it sort of works the same way. It's just not quite as technologically advanced or precise. Basically, the narration gives you instructions on what to do. Okay, now walk here. And then when you get there, start the next segment. Yeah.
Can someone put how to get to that podcast?
Sure. I'm going to put the link in the chat. It's all at uticadetour.com. And then under the different tours, you can click Street View Tour, Podcast Tour, or Earth Tour. And we just showed you guys the Earth Tour. Someone asked in the chat, are we going to do more of these? I knew we were going to get that question. The answer is, I don't know. We'd love to. I think it would be cool to do. And we collected a bunch of information that, on Bag Square West. I know we have particular interest on things like, refugee and immigrant communities. Like that would be a cool one to do something on that topic, or maybe prohibition. We don't know, but if there's interest, maybe we'll do another one.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot. We talk about it all the time. I know I would love to do it. I think time is a factor for both of us, but we've never really let time stop us before. I think it's always just a matter of, really, I think at this point it's partially time and it's partially deciding, all right, what would be the next one? We've got a few ideas kicking around. So
there's a wonderful map here at the History Center. It's an aerial view of Utica, but they have pins or dots where all the Prohibition speakeasies were located.
Oh, interesting.
And it's
right.
Very big handful of places to go. That could be fun.
I moved here in around 1974, and there was a big movement at the time to demolish the train station. Mm-hmm. There was a big protest movement, of which I was part of, to not demolish the train station. Happily.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was the founding director of Sculpture Space. I don't know if you know of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we did an exhibition of sculptures in the train station, probably around 1980. Well, we founded 78, 79, sort of around that period. We did a big exhibition of sculpture in the train station. It's a wonderful building, but Utica has other wonderful buildings. The theater on Genesee Street is also quite extraordinary. It's not what you expect in an impoverished city. It's quite spectacular. So yeah, proud to be in Utica. I came here from New Orleans, and before that I lived in Mexico City and other places. Oh. But I'm glad to be in Utica.
Utica is a great place to be. Ryan, can I ask a question from early in and more of a how it came to be type of thing?
Sure.
So you were talking about the Detour Utica, or Detour when you were in San Francisco and the other cities it was in, and that you got this all together. And then that company just said, okay, all done. So can you walk me through a little bit of that, how you made it actually happen anyway?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they had, here's the interesting thing about, I guess, where I kind of see what they were doing at the time. So they were doing these large tours for major cities. And, I have to say that the quality and the caliber, we did just as good a job as any of these ones where they I think they hired, I don't know if they hired Tom Hanks to do the narration,
they hired
Brooklyn Bridge or something.
Yeah.
It was big name stuff. And ours definitely held its own. They gave, what they did give us for a price was access to a toolkit, a developer's toolkit that we used. And one of the things that was kind of interesting was as we would upload our audio, it used a technology where you would throw your audio in and that audio would be transcribed. And it would be transcribed incredibly accurately. And then you would plot GPS locations for the pieces of audio that you would like to play. And then you could interweave that with, like we had Matt did sound design and music and stuff as you, so that music would play as you were moving from place to place. And then it would gently fade out as you got, I mean, it was incredible. So what this company ended up doing, they shut Detour down. The technology around the translation spun out into a new company called Descript. And that is actually, they charge you translation services like gas. Like they charge you by the minute. And it's an incredible technology, not related to tourism at all. So when this all kind of went kaput, you know, what we really had to work with, we had the collection of historical photos. We had the scripts that Geoff had wrote, and then we had the source audio that we used for the Detour tour. And so what we tried to do is figure out, like, all right, how do we not get fooled again? How can we build this in a way where we're not 100% dependent on one company? Now we're dependent on Google, right, at this point. But we used tools that we thought we could just build in our basement. And so we just kind of took those pieces and reimagined how we might build it with this new toolkit. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was literally just trying to figure out what do we do.
Yeah. One other comment before I turn my mic off again. So in the intro, one of the things that was mentioned that you too, I think the both of you participated in or got going, was Utica Eats, right? Yeah. That was great. Just a comment. That was a wonderful thing for the city. Lots of fun. And so is this. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I say something?
Please.
Okay. I wanted to say something about the Brandegie Krause. The Brandegie Krause Wood family were as wealthy, if not wealthier, than the Proctors. And they were very involved in almost every aspect of the city, including Grace Church, and they've basically been forgotten. I've done a lot of research on them, and I would like to know more about them, and that's all.
No, that's a family I haven't heard of. I see in the chat a lot of there's interest in, several of us are working on a survey related to the Underground Railroad in Utica. We've heard stories about this too, and that's a project that is certainly of interest to us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was one thing I was going to add to Mary's comment that on the tech, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Yeah, I guess, you know, I think in retrospect, although the first version of this was like magical, try marketing a thing to the general public that doesn't have a location, where it's like, you got to, download this app and then walk over to this thing and push a button and see what happened. Like, it was a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around. And, I think that was a challenge with the original project. It was magic, but it wasn't easy to understand. So that's why I think this kind of amalgamation of it hopefully will find a larger audience.
Yeah.
So in the chat, there was a interesting comment.
Now, I can tell you right now, there'll be no butt cups.
Has anyone heard if there were, asking if there were tunnels under Utica?
Chevrolet isn't with you.
That's a new one that I had never heard before.
I have not heard that either.
I have not heard that one either. Does anybody have any more questions for either Ryan or Geoff?
No, this was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Right. We
You're
should
welcome.
do a walking tour one day.
Well, we'll have to make use of it and have a little bag square walking tour with our headphones and listen to the wonderful stories. I'm sure you had fun with Mr. Bottini.
Absolutely. He was a delight. Yeah.
Geoff, I can feel the influence Mr. Bottini had you in infusing you with knowledge. So
Yes.
Great champion. I'm surprised he's not online with us tonight, but he must be busy.
One of the things that I'll add about Joe is that he is a unbelievable storyteller, and I think part of the project that I love about this is capturing the audio from someone that has that depth of knowledge and that innate skill set to weave a story. And, that's something you can't get from a book, you can't get from a video, and we're really happy that that's now kind of preserved.
And what you're doing is preserving. I mean, sometimes it's a moment in time, but just by capturing it, you did a great service for the future, you know. Well, if there's nothing more, Geoff and Ryan, thank you for being with us tonight, but also thank you for putting this together for prosperity as well. Hopefully it will live on for a long time and won't meet the way of some other Google products and get kind of swept away, and then we'll enjoy it while we can.
I hope you all go to the farmers market.
We hope to be there on behalf of the History Center. We're working on the plan right now. All right,
Well,
everyone.
thank you guys for having us.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye, 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 bye.
Bye.
Take care.
No.